Okay. Yes. So
Okay. So, being that I address, once again, my account, I'm going to share with the public Amanda, my wife, Amanda Hayes. She made statements to her sister after she killed Laura. She came up with a plan to dispose of her body, and I assisted her with that plan. I do want to state for the record, because I've never addressed this, even when I did my interview with Amanda Lamb, I did not chop up Laura's body. Yes, I am on camera buying the saw that was used at Walmart, but I don't know a better way to put it than this. Just like if you were cutting vegetables on a countertop, you would use a cutting board because you wouldn't want to scar the countertop. You couldn't cut through Laura's body without cutting the floor up underneath her body. And so the part that I played in the dismemberment was that I held the body up off the floor, and my wife was the one that operated the saw. And like I said, I didn't mention that in my first interview because I didn't wish to prejudice my wife before her trial. But I do want to say that for the record because I'm tired of being defamed. You've seen some TV shows about me. I've seen one, and I just want the record cleared. And so now I want to go into this evidence. Let's go to Exhibit 3, page 1. And I'm just going to read the highlighted section. So Exhibit 3 is an interview of Karen Marie Berry. Karen Berry is Amanda's sister. Amanda came up with a plan to dispose of Amanda's body. Amanda came up with a plan to dispose of Laura's body at a swamp-like creek across the street from her sister's house. And this is her sister speaking to investigators 5 days after we dumped Laura's remains in this creek. And the investigators asking the question. So Laura's telling Amanda, because you, Amanda, took my kid, then I'm going to take your baby. Okay, and what did she say? Karen. Okay, and this is something that I forgot too. She told me that she shoved her. Investigator. Okay, Karen. And she told me that she had shoved her and she hurt her. And she told me that she had hurt her bad. Exhibit 3, page 2. Investigator. She says, the boy's mom said, or the boy's mom told me, you took my boys, I'm going to take your baby from you. Karen, yeah. Interviewer, I pushed her. Karen says, you know what? I don't know which came first. The interviewer says, but it's in that conversation. Karen, they were together, but I don't know which came first. So the interviewer asked her, so the context of this, I heard Laura, as the boy's mom basically threatened to take my baby. Karen says, yeah. Interviewer, and I pushed her, I shoved her. Karen says, yeah, again. So you start to see how Laura was injured and died. Exhibit 3, page 3. I'm just reading the highlighted section, and this is Karen speaking. We went to sit down, and she told me that she had hurt Laura bad, and she told me that statement about where Laura had said that she took her kid, and she was going to take hers. And at this point, I'm just sitting there because she just told me that she hurt somebody bad, and it was bad. And I think that she must have told me that she was dead. Page 4. The investigator, a man named Robert Latour, asked Karen, but when she confides in you that she has done this, Grant is obviously not around. Karen answers, he wasn't. Page 5. Detective Latour asked, something had to have happened to have drawn Grant's attention over there with you. Karen, she asked me if he could come over. She asked me if he could come over, and I said, yeah. This is important because during my trial, Vanessa,
yes.
I had Karen Berry testify on my behalf because she is the only person who could corroborate my account of Laura being fatally injured and dying at Amanda's hands.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I brought Karen into my trial and had her testify, Prosecutor Zellinger intentionally misled her into confusing the jury into believing that I had been present during Amanda's confession and that I had somehow intimidated Amanda into confessing. And so it's important for the people to see the evidence where Karen told the detective that I was not around when this happened. So this is what Karen said transpired after I came over. Page 6. He just kept telling me that she was his wife, he loved her, and he would protect her.
Okay.
which is the truth, which is why I was down there, which is why I helped Amanda cover up and conceal that she had killed my ex-girlfriend in self-defense. Page 7. This is Karen speaking to the police again. And without thinking, I think I mentioned the septic tank in the back of the house. But on the way back there, I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? So when we got back there, I told her, I said, no, this is not a good idea. I think Amanda said, what about the creek across the street? And then on page 8, Karen is speaking again. She says, I don't know. And then I said, and I think I said, there's a septic tank in the backyard. And I think Amanda, because Amanda is the one that walked with me, I guess Grant stayed in the front. I don't remember him being there then. And this is important because, like I said, this was Amanda's plan when we were in Raleigh, that she was going to dispose of Laura's body in this creek. And so it's important for people to realize that I was not around when Amanda confessed to her sister, nor was I around when the sisters walked in the backyard together to discuss how to dispose of Laura's remains. And that's when Amanda presented and asked her sister, what about the creek across the street? Okay. And on page 9 of Exhibit 3, the detective says, do you remember who's saying that? And Karen says, I think Amanda, because she knew about it. She knew where the creek was because she had been there before. He hadn't.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're at Exhibit 3, page 10, and Detective Latour is asking, Amanda told you that she did something bad to Laura. Karen answers, yes. And then she doesn't say that she never actually said that it was Grant that actually did it. And Karen says, no. So, this is an aspect of my trial that my attorneys never showed the jury. However, Karen Berry's statements were entered into evidence. So, the question now is, how did I get convicted of murder? Well, I got convicted of murder because the state framed me. A lot of conspirators acted together to produce evidence of an intentional homicide to overcome my accident defense. Okay? So.
Okay.
But when you look at the medical evidence, Laura's body was recovered in Texas and her remains were autopsied in Texas. And the head and neck were recovered together, and they were autopsied on July 26th. Exhibit 7 is a medical examiner's report from Texas. Okay, on the second page of Exhibit 7, we see that he says, in the presence of Robert Latour, the Raleigh Police Department, this autopsy was conducted. And then he says the head and attached 5 cervical vertebrae are received. And then he notes that the only injury found was the posterior right scalp, which is the back of Laura's head, has a 4-inch by 3-inch area of scalp and subgaleal hemorrhages that are still evident. So what you see from examining his autopsy, and once again, the whole autopsy will be on Facebook, so you can look at it, is that the only injuries found on Laura's remains were a bruise on the back of her head, a large 4 by 3-inch bruise, which is consistent with Amanda having pushed Laura and Laura having fallen. Now I want to direct your attention to Exhibit 5, page 2133. Exhibit 5 is the trial testimony, the sworn testimony of the medical examiner in Texas, Dr. Navi Mambo. And if you look at the first page of Exhibit 7, which is his medical examiner's report, you see that he signed it, and also Stephen Postnick signed it. There were 2 experts that were present during this autopsy, and they signed off on his autopsy. And in Exhibit 5, page 2133, he defines and explains what a subgaleal hemorrhage is. He says, and I quote, what it means, it is bleeding into the scalp and the skin on the head, and that's what subgaleal means. And the prosecutor asked, could they hit their head on something or have been hit in the head with something? And he says, yes. So that's why I bring this up, because it's relevant to show that the actual injuries that were found on Laura's body when her body was recovered and autopsied in Texas are consistent with what Amanda told her sister she did to Laura. Now on page 2148 of Exhibit 5, he's asked a question by the prosecutor. He says, you were asked a question about the injury to the back of the head, but you can't be certain that that's an injury versus the way that blood was pulled if someone was laying in a bathtub. And he says no. I just wanted to bring that up because he's basically saying he doesn't know how that bruise got there, but it is possible that Laura was hitting the head with something. Okay, so back to how I got framed. Exhibit 14. Exhibit 14 is an article that was publicized by WTVD, which is ABC 11 in Raleigh. And the headline of this article is Warrants. Hayes may have lured Ackerson. And it says, newly released search warrants and the alleged murder of Laura Ackerson show the father of her two toddler sons asked her to stop by his apartment. According to the warrant, it was determined prior to death that Laura Ackerson received a message from Grant Hayes to visit the children at his residence on the evening of July 13, 2011. So,
Okay.
this was publicized that I had lured Laura to our house where she died. Next, I'm going to draw your attention to Exhibit 16, page 2952. Now, Exhibit 16 is the trial testimony of a man named Pablo Trinidad. Pablo Trinidad was a career criminal who was facing 168 years in prison. And my lawyer is questioning him. He says, now at some point you learned that a way you could get out from under this 100 potential year sentence was for providing substantial assistance to the federal government. Isn't that right? He says, yes. And at some point someone explained to you that the way it works in the feds, the way you make your situation better is if you can give evidence to the government on other people. Isn't that right? He answers yes. And you made an agreement with the Fed that you would give up names of people in exchange for getting a better deal. Isn't that right? If that's correct. And part of that deal, some of those charges that were potentially facing 15 years to life got dismissed, didn't they? He says yes. And you got some sort of reduction in your potential sentence because of that deal, didn't you? He says that's correct. And he says this, so a year after you were at the Wake County Jail, you testified that
you have 60 seconds remaining.
And you sat down with some people and you started giving them names, didn't you? The answer is that's correct. And you knew that you were going to have this meeting where you would give them whatever names you can, didn't you? He says that's correct. And then my lawyer asked him, what you were told is the more you give them, the better you get. The better the deal you get, aren't you? And he says that's correct. And these...
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Let me call you back, Vanessa.
Okay.